Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Testing, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2. Hey there. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Code. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. I have Flavia Naves with me. Flavia is a Brazilian lawyer turned U.S. lawyer, and most recently was the General Counsel for the token issuer for USDC, Circle, and is now one of the commissioners for the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. And we're going to hear a lot more about stable tokens and Flavia on today's episode. Join me in welcoming Flavia to Beyond the Code. Flavia, welcome to Beyond the Code.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I listened to a few interviews that you gave recently to do with being a foreign lawyer in the US, and I resonated with them very much because as an American growing up in Israel and studying law here, I always kind of thought that would be the direction I would go in, and I kind of planned out my career in such a way that at some point I would come to the US and do an LLM for the sole purpose of kind of like integrating myself into American society again, like professionally, so that I can go from there. Anyways, everything I had planned out for myself, which in the end is not happening because I went in a different direction. You kind of like played out in this podcast episode that I listened to, and I could very much relate.
Yeah, it's interesting how life takes you in different paths that you originally planned, right? When we go to law school, lawyers are very methodical, right? We like to plan things ahead to mitigate risk, and then we think that our plan is going to flow smoothly, and that's how life is going to be, right? And obviously, life is not like that. We're not robots; we're human beings, and we adapt to change. So, it takes you in places that you would never expect. But I found that those surprises, even though in the moment may feel very disconcerting and very stressful because it's throwing off your plan, somehow works out in a way that you don't expect. And then, 5, 10 years down the road, you're like, wow, I'm actually grateful that I was thrown this big hot potato and I had to figure out what to do with it, because you learn and you grow as a human being and as a professional as well, right? So, yeah, and for foreign trained attorneys is even more challenging because you come to the US and you have to adjust to the system here and obviously compete with locally trained attorneys, show why you're valuable and why you matter. So there's more of that comes with immigrating to the US and bringing yourself into this profession. The LLM is just a rite of passage, as I like to say, right?
Exactly.
My law degree is the one that I got in Brazil, and I got my LLM here so I could take the bar exam, but that's pretty much what it was.
And then you kind of just like rolled with the punches and somehow ended up being one of the commissioners for the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. But I'm jumping to the end. I want to, as I told you, I like to kind of like go back as far back as possible, back to your, early days in Brazil and how you end up where you are today. Why don't you just like walk me through it and, introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, of course. So, when I was in high school, this is, oh my goodness, very late 80s and early 90s. Okay, I just told everyone how old I am. I decided that I wanted to study in the United States as an exchange student. I have visited the US in my early teens, gone to Disney World like all the kids go, and, done all that stuff. And you get so excited to be in America and to see all these things that you see in movies. And when I was 17, I decided to do my senior year in high school as an exchange student. So I signed up for a program, and I was very fortunate to be selected by a family that lived in northeastern Pennsylvania, a very small town called Hazleton, which unless you are from the US and unless you are from northeastern Pennsylvania, you will not know what that is, right? But it's close to where President Biden is from, which is Scranton, that area there in northeastern Pennsylvania. So I did my senior year with that host family and had a wonderful, wonderful time. They are my host family to this day. I talk to them, to now, 32 years later, and
Wow.
they're still my host family. So I had such a great experience, made friends and everything, and I wanted to go to college here. My father wanted me back in Brazil. He's like, no, you had did a year in America, come back to Brazil. We all miss you. So I went back to Brazil and went to college. As in most countries, law school is at college level, right? So you go straight into law school. I did it for 5 years, but I kept on coming back to visit my host family in the summers. I had about a 2 week break because that's winter in Brazil. So you get a 2 week break, and I would come and visit my host family, go back, and all of that. So within my last year in law school, I started interning at a law firm in Brazil, focusing on international transactions. And I decided, listen, I really want to go back to the U.S. and I want to practice law there. I was doing this in Brazil and I wanted to do it here. So once I graduated from law school and I took the bar and everything, I came back. That was in June of 1999. Came back not knowing what I was going to do, where I was going to go, what was needed for me, because unlike what I soon came to learn, unlike Brazil, the United States has different state bars. So you don't take a national bar like I did in Brazil and you get admitted, right? So being here, I took time to figure out where I wanted to be, what kind of law I wanted to practice, and then figure out what bar that it would be most suited to me. So that's when I realized that, where I was in Pennsylvania, um, Washington, D.C. would be actually a very good location for me due to its international approach, foreign relations, and everything else. I'm not a New York person. New York is a bit too much for me. So I selected to take the DC bar exam. And for that, I had to get an LLM. Well, not an LLM. They needed 26 credits in an ABA approved law school on matters that are tested in the bar exam. So I was able to go and figure out what it is that they tested in the bar exam, select my classes. And then I found a law school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania called Widener University School of Law, which was open to do that for me. Because many of the other schools that I reach out in Philly or in New Jersey or New York, like, no, we have, you either do the JD or the LLM. There is no other thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't need either one of those. I need something in the middle. So I called Wine. They're like, sure, we'll do that for you. So I attended and I completed my classes in May of 2001. And then I took the bar in DC in July of 2001. But the interesting thing is when I was studying for the bar, I took Barbary, like most law students in the US at that time did. And I approached one of the instructors about, I'm foreign trained and I'm coming here and I'm doing this. Any tips for me? And he said to me, well, don't feel bad if you don't pass the bar exam because foreign trained attorneys don't really have a high ratio of passage. And I'm
Good.
thinking to myself, I'm
Thanks for the vote
sorry,
of confidence.
right? Have I met you before? Hi, well, nice to meet you. I'm Flavia. And, it was just interesting that the assumption was the negative, was the kind of like, this is not going to work out for you, right?
Yeah.
So, not to, to prove him wrong, but I passed.
Good for
and,
you.
and that was my first bar in the US. So at that point, I had to figure out like what to do, right? Do I go to a law firm? Do I go in house and everything? And I was really focused on foreign relations. I wanted something in DC that would marry my training in Brazil to now my bar in the US. But I ended up getting invited to interview with a judge in South Central Pennsylvania, a small county called York County, who needed a law clerk, right? Law clerk or attorneys, graduated attorneys that help the judges, decide cases and write his opinions and everything. And I'm like, litigation? That's like the furthest thing away from what I like to do. I'm a transactional attorney, right? But, I took the chance. I'm like, listen, this can actually prove to be really beneficial to me. And I met with him and our personalities clicked right away. We had a very easy conversation. I think he could care less that I had an accent or I came from, he saw in me, someone that he could talk to and collaborate, and same thing for me. So I took that job and I clerked for him for almost 3 years. Extremely grateful for that opportunity, because if people, law firms or companies, were not thinking of me because they thought that I couldn't do the job, right? You have an accent, you're not trained in the US, you're really not going to be able to do a good job. A judge thought that I could, right? So it was a great vote of confidence that he took on me. And I still keep in touch with him to this day, because I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity, because it really kind of gave me that kind of stamp of approval. Yes, you are qualified to practice law in the US, right? And yeah, so that was a long time ago, but something that I look back with a lot of fondness, because again, if I don't believe, if I hadn't had that opportunity with him, my path would have been very different than what it was.
Yeah, it's really important, like, to recognize those, like, little places along your journey. Like, and it's not always clear why you're going through the steps, but when you look back, it's sometimes just like really, really stands out. Those people who really helped you get to where you are today. So you
Absolutely.
did the
Yeah.
clerkship,
Yeah.
and then where did you go from there?
So I knew that I wanted to be in-house from that point. I mean, I had done litigation for almost 3 years. I'm like, there's no way I want to go into a law firm. I mean, I don't want to do this, right? I'm a transactional attorney. I want to do this
You
in-house.
wanted to go back to your roots.
Yes, exactly. So, I started looking for jobs, and about 6 months before, it was a 2-year commitment that I had with him. And so 18 months into my clerkship, I said, hey, Judge, 6 months away, my clerkship is going to expire. I want to go in-house, and I'm going to start looking for jobs. Great. And then, in-house jobs in South Central Pennsylvania are not as prominent or as, available as it would be in Silicon
In New
Valley
York.
or New York or other places, right? So once the end of my term was nearing, I told the judge, I'm like, hey, I'm not having much success. It's taking a while. He's like, listen, you take the time that you need. I want you to leave here with a job that you want, not the job that you have to have, right? Um, so I was with him for 2 years and 10 months. It took another 10 months, and then I left and I went to be corporate counsel at a company that was actually is really well known in northeastern United States, called Susquehanna Falls Graph. They made pottery, plates, cups, and things like that, household goods, and had been in business for centuries, and it was family owned and everything. So I joined them, and they brought me in as their technology attorney. And I guess probably because I was the youngest person, not
Pottery
only in my
technology.
years, yeah, or profession, but they put me to do cable television licensing, software licensing, and any other technology services. And I had to learn. I mean, I did not know any of these things. They were all very interesting, but I didn't know any of these things. And so I started working with them. And luck has it, within 8 months, the company was sold and every single employee was laid off. Yes. So, hot potato
Your
that throws
inauguration
on
into the
you, and
system.
and you were like, oh my God, right? So I'm now, what do I do now? What do I do now? And I had really enjoyed the tech side of things, right? Working with the engineers and like product development and all that stuff. I really, really liked. So I was talking to a few folks within the company, and they're like, Flavia, if that's what you want to do, you need to get out of Pennsylvania and go to California. Like there's none of that here for you. You're going to go to Silicon Valley, and that's all that there is, right? So that was July of 2005. I packed up my stuff and moved to San Francisco, and have spent about 20 years or so in
In San Fran.
California,
Wow, in
right?
the Bay
I,
Area.
I moved to Wyoming 2 weeks ago, but spent 19 years in California, and got really in depth into that industry. So I spent the first about 10 years doing technology licensing, working in different companies that do enterprise software licensing, open source,
Hmm.
music licensing, a myriad of technology licensing matters. Worked also with television. I was for a little bit of time. I was down in Los Angeles. I work in Univision, but supporting their CTO. So there was a component of entertainment coupled with technology. And then I came back to Northern California. And then it was around the early 2010s that the company that I was with was acquired, and they were going through a very long transition of acquisition. And after about 2 years of that transition, I said, I've had enough. I'm going to move on, and decided to take a completely different approach. Right at that time, I was senior enough in my career that I thought I want to really do something that is more on a management level, or a director or general counsel, something like that. And I started looking for jobs, and then I came across this job that was to be the U.S. attorney for a British-based company. But that company had nothing to do with what I was doing. They did financial services. Now, I knew nothing about financial services, right? Specifically, they did credit card processing. And I was like, okay, so what is this? Now, I do remember that in my last employer, they had signed up for Braintree through PayPal to do payments.
Okay.
And somehow I had to read something called the network rules. And I was like, what are the network rules, right? So when I pulled the Visa network rules and I wrote over 800 pages of things that are pretty much ineligible, right? I was like, okay, I guess this is okay. I mean, what am I going to do with 800 pages of something I don't understand? So I told the GC, I said, listen, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't know anything about this. I think it's very interesting. I would love to learn, and I would love to have the opportunity to lead the U.S. office of your company. And then he said, listen, here's what it is. I cannot teach you how to be a good lawyer. I think you are a good lawyer. What I can do is teach you payments. So I'm going to give you this job, and I'm going to teach you payments, and you're going to run this office. So this is the other person. When you think back of the pivotal moments that you have, it was this judge and was this guy, this general counsel, that time at WorldPay. If he hadn't given me the opportunity that he did, said, I'm going to give you this chance because I think you can do this, I would not have ended up where I am right now, because he was the one that gave me the ability to transition to financial services and to learn this industry the way that I did.
I'm just so
So I
surprised at
took that
how
on. Yeah.
I'm just so surprised at how honest you were. Like, I was sure you were going to be like, I just said I'm going to fake it till I make it, and I told them I was an expert in financial services because that's what I would have
I
done.
I mean, it was so foreign to me. It's like brain surgery and foot surgery. That different, right? That I don't know that I could fake it. And I was so concerned of getting, because he gave me like a template of their agreements. And I started reading it, 75 pages long, because again, it has so many terms that flow down from banks and things
Yeah,
like
sure,
that,
sure, I'm
that I'm
familiar.
reading it and I'm like, oh my God, who signs these things, right? And so to me, it was like, I need to be honest with them, right? Because if I take this job and I don't do a good job, they're going to fire me because I'm not doing a good job. I want to be honest with him that I'm like, listen, I will learn. You teach me and I will do this, but there's going to be an on ramp for me, right? And he did give me that opportunity, and I'm so grateful that he did. I did tell him that I read the recent network course, which I did. Did not understand a thing about it, but I read, so I knew what they were. And So I spent time with them, and that was WorldPay, and WorldPay was acquired by Ventive at that time. So during the acquisition, I left the business and I went to Intuit. And I went to Intuit to support their credit card payroll processing, you know, and then in that, they had some licenses that they said, hey, Flavia, you're also going to manage these things. They're called money transmission licenses. And I'm like, what the heck is this? Oh, you need these to run payments. I'm like, no, you don't. I've been working with credit card payments for 3 years. You do not need these licenses to. No, 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 no. We do peer-to-peer payments. Oh, okay. Right. So I was like, okay, now I have to learn this brand new thing. Money transmission. I don't know what this is. Oh, it's regulated at the state level. Great. Oh, and each state has its
Has its
own.
own money.
Okay, so now I have to learn 50, not just one, 50, right? And then so now I go embark into that, start getting connected with the states, with the commissioners and with the examiners and learn that stuff. And found this industry that is such a niche. Like this is, I tell it's like three cats and a dog scattering, running around. Like these are the people that know this thing, right? And came to really, really like it. It's very close to, it's banking at the state level is what it is, right? So I came to learn that industry and really get close and really like it. So I continued in it and had not been again for learning this industry, I wouldn't have ended up at Circle, right? Because Circle is a money transmitter. And when they hire me because I'm a money transmission attorney, right? And they needed someone that understood well their licensing regime to be able to support USDC. So, I look back to 2001 when I started with my judge, and then in 2012 when I pivoted to payments, right? You have these moments in your life that you're like, okay, this is such a random thing that I'm doing. Like I'm doing litigation, then I'm doing payments. But when you tie it all together, it kind of like, okay, that makes complete sense for where I am right now. Right. But again, is that plan that I thought that as every lawyer, I thought that my plan was going to be like this. Right.
For
No, my
sure.
plan was like this and like this and like that, you know. But I don't regret a bit. People ask me, would you have done it any differently? Absolutely not. No, because if I had taken in, it's the butterfly effect. Any step that I could have taken would not have guided me the way that I ended up. And I'm very grateful for everything that I've learned thus far. So
So retrace your steps just a little bit. So you went from Intuit to Circle.
no, I work with a few startups in the meantime. I work with a small company called Velo Payments, and then I work with another company called Quill. These were very small. Quill unfortunately got hit with COVID when we are COVID, and it was a very small startup that unfortunately did not make through the other
Mm-hmm.
side of COVID. But yeah, that was what took me to Circle.
Okay. So you start your job at Circle. Do you have any background or understanding of crypto?
No,
Okay.
no, none at all. I actually, funny thing, because again, coming from payments and money transmission, I'm totally ingrained in drinking the Kool-Aid of banking services, right? I'm like, oh yeah, banking rails are the good things. Like, that's all that we do. Yes, they are crappy. Things take forever to settle. These banks are all covering their boom booms. Everything that you do, it takes, is all the shifting of liability here and there and all of it. But that's a holy grail and that's how things are done. And if you do anything differently, you're trying to do something weird, right? So to me, anything that involved moving money on a blockchain, people were doing like at 3 o'clock in the morning in their basement, wearing a hoodie in the dark, and they're doing something weird, right? So I'm like, I don't know, you know, but then I spoke with Jeremy, right? And Jeremy explained to me what USDC was and what
Wait,
they what
just
it
for the
did.
benefit of
Yeah.
our listeners, not everybody knows what USDC and Circle are. So just give me 1 second to just kind of like bring people up to speed. Circle is the issuer of USDC, which is a stablecoin. A stablecoin is a token on the blockchain that is tied to the US dollar or to another currency. Now, Circle also has a stablecoin that's tied to the euro.
That's correct.
So it is, I'm at least as far as I'm concerned, the most regulated stablecoin to date. Okay, we'll get to Wyoming's proposed stablecoin in a moment, and I guess could be seen as one of the more legit products within the crypto space. I usually explain it to non-crypto folks as a licensed crypto bank,
Yep.
because
Yep.
people just think about banks the same way that.
Yeah. You did an excellent job,
Well,
but
I have one. I have one question
yeah.
before you. before you start. Um, so everything you just spoke about your career trajectory and how you kind of like pivoted it into each thing without having a deep understanding of it, and or without being like deeply heavily invested in the technology or the product, whatever it is. It was kind of just like, yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And that you did the same thing when you got to Circle with crypto. You initially thought that people were like wearing hoodies in basements and doing shady stuff.
Yeah.
But crypto is not like other sectors in that like there's an expectation that if you're working or developing in the space, then you need to be like religious about it almost.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
And I
were
absolutely
you
wasn't.
infected by that? You weren't.
No, I absolutely wasn't. And I think that was actually helpful because
Okay.
it made me look at it with a very analytical approach instead
Mm-hmm.
of being emotionally tied to it. Right? Because when you're emotionally tied to it, then you overlook both sides of the equation, right? Because you get so invested in it. For me, because I was completely off, I didn't own any tokens. I didn't have a wallet. I didn't have anything. I was like, okay, this is just another money transmission product, right? And we're going to work in this and make sure that this is right. And to your point, right? My first question to Jeremy Allaire, the CEO, was, what is your relationship with the regulators? Right? And he said it's very good. We work very collaborative with them. And, to your point, we want USDC to be regulated as it needs to be and everything, because that was extremely important to me, right? I will not be stepping foot in something that I didn't believe that it was being done the right way. Because there are many other projects out there that are called stablecoins, and they may be, that may not follow the same tenets as USDC does, right? And each person does their own thing, right? But for me, it was really important that they did that. So once I understood what USDC was and what the purpose is, I'm like, yes, we are going to find a better way to move money, right? Because I don't have to rely on my holy grail of these banking rails that take, 3 to 5 days and are like chicken wire with band-aids at the end. And people are just like, again, uh, shifting liability to each other because they're so worried about who's going to be responsible for what. This moves in 25 seconds, one wallet to the next, and we're done, right? So I really got into it. But I would tell you that my first 2 months at the company, I would have
Wait,
a
so what?
headache
When
every
did you
day.
join? I
Yeah.
think of everything in terms of cycles.
Yeah.
So when did you join?
It was in at the end of the summer of 2020. So
Okay,
September of
yeah.
2020. And when I joined Circle, we had about 70 employees, 70.
Hmm.
Um, so I came in
And
and, started working with the team,
hmm.
and they sent me the, dictionary and all these kind of things. And I started reading that, and I'm like getting a headache every day, right? And I thought that it was because, oh my God, I'm waking up so early. These people work in the East Coast and I'm on West Coast. So I'm up at 5:30 in the morning every day. I'm thinking that's what it was. It was actually not. It was me kind of ramping up to understand this entire industry. And every single member of my legal team that I hire after that, I always told them, I said, give yourself 2 months. It doesn't matter where you come from. You can be a completely crypto person and you can come from a bank. Give yourself 2 months because this is a very different place. And you're going to need time to adjust. Don't beat yourself up and think you're not doing a good job. It is part of the process. It's not climbing a hill, is not climbing a mountain, is not like climbing Everest. You get there, you're like wearing a air, tank because you're like barely breathing, but you're
and
like, oh my
a black
God,
hoodie.
exactly, I made it. Look at this. And then you go down, right? Because now you know. So it was, and once I got into it and actually got to understand what it was, I started getting really invested, but it's still not to be the believers, as I call it, right? I never became that. And I think why it made me such an effective general counsel for Circle is the fact that throughout that entire time, even though I did believe passionately in the technology and in the purpose and what it could do, I never let that overcloud my perspective that we have to do things the right way, right? And it has to be done this way. And there's no question about it. So I was with them for 3 years. I'm extremely grateful. And but I made a decision to make a change overall in my life. I was approaching an age that many people decided that they're going to go
You look
or
incredibly young, by the way.
I thank you
Like,
so much. I've been told that my mother has given me very good genes, and I use a lot of face lotion as well. But I was approaching that age in which people start thinking maybe I should buy an RV and just start driving the US. I do have an RV, but that was not the purpose. Um, and I was like, what do I do now? Right? What is this the place for me? Do I stay? Do I go? So I took about 6 months thinking about it, reassessing my personal health, my family, and what was really important to me at that time. And that was when I made the decision to leave. That was in January of 23. I said, I'm with Jeremy, and I said, listen, I think I've had my term here and it's time for me to go. And gave him a 6 months notice to turn this around, find my successor, let all the regulators know why I was leaving, because when someone, a general counsel of a regulated company leaves, the first impression is that there's something wrong, right? And there was absolutely nothing wrong. I left the company in a excellent place from a legal and compliance perspective. I had a compliance officer that worked with me that was outstanding. So I had no concerns at all. It was a completely personal decision of mine based on where I was in my life, my health, and my family. And so I worked through, and then June 30th of 23 was my last day. And I took some time away, enjoy some family time. And then while I was in that period, while actually transitioning as Circle, I got approached by the governor of Wyoming. And they had just passed legislation to issue a stable token in Wyoming. And they're like, we need to put a commission together. We need subject matter experts to join this commission. Would you be interested? And I'm like, I still live in California. Everything. No, that's totally fine. You can do this remotely. So I started with them once in July of 23, and I was doing this remotely, right? And then without the back and forth, I'm like, listen, I need to put my ground in Wyoming. And, living in here is not that bad. It's a beautiful place.
it's not that bad. It's
And
beautiful.
yes, I am not regretting anything at all. So 2 weeks ago, yeah, end of June, we got to Wyoming. But yeah, so what
Okay,
Wyoming
wait.
is
Hold up.
doing?
Hold up
Yeah,
1 second.
yeah.
First of all, I wonder if you could just tell me what it was like being in Circle on March 10th to 13th, 2023.
Yeah.
when all the
Oh
when
my
Silicon Valley
God.
Bank and other banks, Signature Bank, were
When that went
falling
down.
apart, and I was like, "Thank God I bank in crypto. I got my money in Circle." And then all
Yes.
of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh shit,
Oh my goodness
Circle's
gracious.
depegging." It
Yeah,
must have
so
been a complete like shitstorm.
I recall that vividly because like those moments in your life when you go such a traumatic event that you never forget. So it was Thursday night, and I was seated. No, Wednesday night. It was Wednesday night, and I was seated, waiting for my daughter to come out of her soccer practice, in the car in the parking lot, and I get a call from my controller, and he said, Flavia, there's some ramblings about Silicon Valley Bank and we don't know what's going on. And my first question is, where are the reserves? How much of the reserves do we have there? Oh, we have this much. Da-da-da. We already put calls in to retrieve the reserves and everything. I'm like, okay, let's keep us posted. So that was Thursday. And by Thursday night, the sense was it's going to go down tomorrow, right? Again, the main focus is the reserves. I'm not thinking about the corporate assets at this time, like the company's money.
Just
Yeah.
to open up our parentheses 1 second, Circle's main thing is that their digital tokens are backed by real dollars. So when you're talking about the reserves, you're talking about those real dollars that are sitting in reserves. If God forbid the token destabilizes.
That's correct, because that money doesn't belong to Circle. It belongs to the token holders. Circle is a custodian of those assets as a money transmitter. So that money doesn't belong to Circle. So my first focus is, where's the money that doesn't belong to us and what are we doing to protect it? Now, the money that belongs to us, the corporate assets, am I worried about this? Of course. But that's focus number two. Focus number one is the money that belongs to the USDC holders. Where is it and what are we doing to protect it? Right? So by that time, we had put calls in to retrieve as much as we could, but Silicon Valley Bank has stopped responding to wires because it was illiquid at that point, right? So Friday afternoon comes and it gets called by the Fed and FDIC that the bank is going to receivership. I said, oh my God, okay. So we still have money left in there, right? And the money is frozen. So between noon of Friday and 3 p.m. on Sunday, I did nothing except sit in front of my computer. I slept, I think, 4 hours each night. I did not shower. I stayed in my pajamas the entire time. My CFO, everyone, we're on the same way, and answer calls from regulators. Like I got calls from state regulators, federal regulators. Where's the motor? What are you guys doing? Da, 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 da. What are the? I'm like, we're here. We're on it. We're on top of it, right? And while this all happening, obviously folks are getting concerned. Oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get my money out on Monday. I'm going to start selling my USDC for lower than $1. And what we're trying to tell people is, because I think folks were still a little concerned on what had happened a year before with Terra Luna,
Mm-hmm.
right? A year before when Terra Luna depegged, which called
And
yourself a stablecoin as well, right?
Terra Luna was an algorithmic stablecoin, which means it
Exactly.
wasn't backed by real reserves. It had some Bitcoin and other crypto assets that were a reserve of sorts, but it wasn't one to one. And the way
Exactly.
that they tried to maintain their essentially the value of their stablecoin was by having another token that they issued that was supposed to offset the price, the value of its stable token.
Yeah.
And basically, due to a hack and ultimately a run on people's money and the complete crash of Bitcoin, it's arguable what came first.
The
Terra
chicken or the egg.
Luna,
Yeah. Yeah.
Terra Luna completely crashed, went virtually to zero, and people lost billions of
A
dollars.
lot of
So
money. Yeah.
I could understand that somebody who had been through that wasn't, and had believed heavily in an algorithmic stablecoin was just like, these, non-algorithmic stablecoins are all just the same. These banks
Exactly.
are all just the same. Like, everything's going under. The world
Yeah.
is going to end. Like, I'm willing to sell my dollars for anything that's more than a penny, basically.
Exactly. I'm going to get in a spaceship and go to Mars because Earth is going to explode. It got to that place, right? So I was like, okay, folks, let's just remember that that money, that dollar that you gave us, is
Mm-hmm.
in the bank. It's there, right? And the FDIC and the Fed were figuring out what to do. They would bail out. The question is, how much would they give back? Now, being a money transmitter, Circle is obligated by law to make up that difference. So that was the other thing. We came up publicly and we said, we will match that at any point to calm people's nerves, right? But it wasn't until Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific when the Fed announced that they would back up every single, deposit in Silicon Valley Bank. That's when it repegged, because then people were like, oh, okay, I'm going to get my money back. So what happens that in between excuse me, Friday afternoon and Sunday afternoon, if anyone traded USDC on the secondary market, that person who sold lost 13 cents or whatever. I think it went down to 87 cents. And the person who purchased it, when they went to redeem, because they were always redeem 1-to-1, they made 13 cents, right?
It's good
So, and it
arbitrage
all
opportunity.
because of
FUD.
fear.
Yeah.
It was all fear for nothing, right? So we depegged out of fear. And again, I think it's a lot because of some, just remembering what happened to Terra Luna and folks wanting to get some money out of it, even though the company said, we are different than they are. We're a regulator. We have an obligation to make you whole. We have all these things, da 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 da, right? So yeah, that was a very stressful event. I do remember on Sunday afternoon asking my CFO, can I go now wash my hair? And that was pretty much first thing I wanted to do was take a shower. And I was like, I just want to go and just like, oh, relax a little
Detox.
bit. Um, and yeah, that was an interesting experience. And we had to stay calm,
You're probably
right?
thinking
You
like,
have to stay calm
thank God I give my
because
notice.
there's so much happening that you have to stay calm and you need to stay focused, right? And people are freaking out. I'm like, what is going to freak out going to do? Nothing. Nothing's going to freak out. We're going to make wrong decisions. I'm going to get a lot of white hair, right? And wrinkles, which no one wants that. There's no reason to freak out, right? So we try to stay focused. And again, the main concern was the customer assets, the reserve, and how is it that we brought that to stability. And when once the Fed announced, then things changed. But yeah, it's funny because again, I was going through my term, my notice at the company. I was like, well, I'm here until
Not
the
my
end of
problem.
June. Well, no, but I'm here until the end of June, and I wanted to make sure that as I left the company, I I left the company feeling good about it, right? There are folks that once they give notice, it's like, well, I'm already out of here. I take a lot of pride in the thing that I do. And I was a general counsel to the end. The regulators were calling me. My team was expecting me to answer. I had to come up to it irrespective of whether I was going through a notice period, right? It was my job until the end. So I didn't really shut off my email until 6 p.m. on June 30th. That was like, that's a signing off, right? But before then, the bucket was, that was it. The buck stop was me, and I had to answer. So
I, uh, I think I'm most grateful at that time. I'm I'm Sabbath observant, so on from Friday afternoon until Saturday night, we don't use any phones or anything or electric
yes,
devices. So
exactly.
I
Yeah,
had
yeah.
no idea that it was depegging, and then after on Saturday night, I took a look at the news and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like I don't know what I
Yes.
would have done. I probably would have freaked out and sold at 87 if I hadn't
Yeah.
had the good grace of not
Well,
having
this is
phone
good that you have
access.
Shabbat because if you didn't, then you probably would have made unwise decisions in that
Ex-
period of time, right?
exactly.
So,
And I
yeah.
think like every time that Bitcoin has like majorly crashed, it's been over Shabbat, and on Saturday night it's like managed to stabilize to some
Yeah.
extent. Otherwise, like
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust myself.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Oh, that's
yeah.
good. That's funny. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the Wyoming Commission. Just
Yeah.
as like a general note to my listeners, Wyoming has taken some really interesting steps to try and make itself become the Delaware of crypto, I guess. They were the first, and I think still the only state to come up with a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization framework to come and register companies as a pseudo DAO in Wyoming, and they've done a whole bunch of other stuff, and including just I think a couple weeks ago, the University of Wyoming set up a Bitcoin Research Institute, and there's just like a lot of very good, positive, I'd say, mature vibes coming out of Wyoming State vis-a-vis crypto. Less like the degen stuff, more the corporate, respectable style crypto stuff. And Wyoming already has so much to offer in its beautiful parks and forests and streams. So I can't think of a better state to have a crypto conference and invite me to. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
um, but and most recently, I mean, when I say most recently, it was like a year and a half ago, I think, where they started the process for issuing it's the first state issued stablecoin, essentially. And you're one of the one of seven
One of the seven
commissioners
commissioners. Yes. Yeah.
um, appointed for to make this happen, essentially. So I would love to hear from you what you guys have done to date, where things are going, why you think having a state issued stablecoin is a good thing, especially since know a thing or two about other stablecoins, which in my mind seem to be doing just fine. Um, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you pointed out, Wyoming has always been a kind of trailblazer in things, going to law school in the US and learning about corporations, I had no idea Wyoming was actually the first state to incorporate LLCs. It was not
Really?
Delaware. People think it was Delaware, but Wyoming did it first, just Delaware got the credit for it. So Wyoming has always been forward thinking on business, right? And identified digital assets and blockchain as another way to promote, you know, services to its citizens, but also benefit transactions. I mean, it's obviously commodities based state, right? With a lot of mining and water and all these kind of things. But how do we actually incorporate this new technology to advance the state? So instead of saying, oh, this is a bad thing or there's too much risk in it, okay, what are the risks and what it is that we need to do to understand what they are and to
Hmm.
mitigate them? So we took the time to do that, and it started, as you mentioned, by coming up with a structure for DAOs, setting up a complete research area in the University of Wyoming for blockchain studies, coming up with the special purpose depository institutions, the SPDIs, and then this next frontier is the stable token. So what it is a response to obviously the federal government's delayed approach to a central bank digital coin, where other countries are more advanced on CBDCs. The United States is taking a little bit longer to get there. So the state saw in it an opportunity twofold. Number one, to continue advancing the US as a progressive country for technology, right? So if the federal government is going to take its time, maybe the states are the place where this is going to advance. And the states have been what, sometimes called the laboratory of innovation. Many times things start at the state level and then go to the federal level because it takes time to catch up. So the state did that and also saw in it an opportunity for its residents, but obviously the token is more broadly open, so it will be anyone that uses it to benefit from faster processing and lower transactions fees, right? Again, credit card transactions or take longer, ACH transactions take longer. There's a fee associated with it. Even if it's an ACH or Zelle, anything takes 2 to 3 days for you to get the money. Banks are making interest as that money is flowing. And the people that are not benefiting from it at all are the sender and the recipient. But anyone that is in the middle of that flow is benefiting from the movement of money. The state wants now the sender, the recipient, to actually be the benefits of the transaction, not the parties, right? So putting that in a blockchain makes sense. Um, so it came up with this concept of the token. Now, what is this token going to be? How is it going to get backed? Many discussions were had around. Is it a commodity-based token? Is it going to be a fiat-based token? What are we going to do? And the first approach is going to be fiat-backed due to the very, very hard stability that you have, right? It's always one-to-one. Whenever you have a commodity, you may be dealing with prices of commodity fluctuating up and down, right? It's always one-to-one US dollars. So we back this with US dollars, one-to-one.
Hmm.
And we make this something that is issued by the government. So it provides that additional level of trust to people. Why? Because everything that we do is public. Every single decision that we make, every single conversation that we have, every meeting that we have is public. So it gives that additional level of comfort to people like, yes, this is actually being issued and I trust and I understand what it is. Many of the principles are going to be very recognizable to people that use stable coins. Is always going to be an auditor behind it making sure that it's one-to-one at all times, and you're going to have to be KYC to be able to get access to it. So a lot of these principles, the reserves are going to need to be managed in a way that is prudent and managing risks. So kind of have a compliance officer and all these kind of things. So all of these principles are going to be recognized by stable token holders, because there are other issuers that follow these same principles. And in what you have in addition to it is again the level of the government, that is that public facing entity that everything is public. One of the first questions that we got when we thought about this is like, well, now you're going to be issuing money. No, the state is not issuing money, right? The money behind this is US dollar issued by the Federal Reserve. So the state is not coming up with its own money. The same thing that when Paxos or Circle issue their tokens is backed by money that comes from the Federal Reserve. In this case, the same thing. right? So the state of Wyoming is just looking for another way to digitize the dollar and put in a blockchain, and is going to be the custodian of the reserves. And the one distinct element on this that really attracted me, not only the fact that you have a state pushing this forward, but the other element that was really attractive to me is the public good aspect of it. Because, the reserves, for example, when Circle or Paxos invest the reserves, right, the interest that is made on it is used by the company to run its business, right? Pay salaries and everything, pay vendors and all of it. So what the state of Wyoming is going to do is the interest that is generated in the reserves is going to pay the vendors that are going to power this, because the state is not a technologist, so you're going to have to put people to do it. But the remainder is going to the people of Wyoming, is going to be invested in schools, in roads, and things like that. So there's the social element of this that is really, really important, right? Is giving back to the community on that kind of use of that technology. So it's something that is very interesting. We are right now in the stage of hiring the compliance officer, the CFO, the CISO to work, and we're putting together subcommittees to develop the procurement process for us. So we have been approved to do procurement to get the vendors in place, and the goal is to get that all established and have these vendors aligned by the end of the year, so that we can start doing beta testing on this, right? Because what I told the team is the vision is this is a multi-chain public multi-chain approach, but you don't start with 5 chains, right? You pick one, you go with that one, and you beat that thing into submission, right? Because you need to find where it breaks, and you fix those breaks, and then you go again, and then you give yourself about 3 to 6 months, make sure that everything is flowing, the pipes are still intact, and then you select second chain and the third chain and the fourth, and then you go on and on, right? So I work with a very good group of people. My fellow commissioners are excellent. 3 of them are elected officials. So the governor is our chairman. We have the state auditor and the state treasurer. And then we have 4 subject matter experts. Myself, we have Joe Breville, who is highly involved in the government of Wyoming. He also has his own trust company in Jackson. We have Jeff Wallace, who represents the community banks in Wyoming. And then we have David Pope, who is an accountant and is bringing a lot of the financial knowledge and support to this. So I have the benefit of collaborating with these commissioners and just really making sure that we are pursuing this with the vision of what's best for the state of Wyoming. Because what I told the governor, as I said, is an immense privilege and a huge burden to do what we do, to be the first. Because if you get this right, you get all the glory. But if you get this wrong, you get all the ripping. And then the next person that comes after you gets all the glory, right? So we
Too
need
true.
to make sure that we do this right to start with.
Okay, bunch of questions. First of all,
Yeah.
really, really cool. And I think it's a great way to pivot, kind of like from the noisy, crazy corporate job to something a little bit more out in the country. Like I said, I'm so jealous that you're living out there. It's really beautiful. Who do you envision being your main user base?
So we started thinking about that. What is the use case? And the use case is obviously facilitating transactions. We think that there's going to be some good adoption to start with in the state of Wyoming, obviously, right? Because the citizens, they're going to be able to pay their taxes with a token,
That
for
was my next
example.
question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if they use the token, but it comes the educational element of that token, because you don't want the token to be issued, to be used, and then redeemed. It has no use for that, right? The token needs to live, to be in circulation. That's what matters. So there's going to be an educational component, but the goal is that you start with that. So you start getting the community used to that. And then you start having, merchants accept that as well in Wyoming. And then more broadly, if you think it's the same thing as it is with USDC or Paxos tokens or any other stablecoin, the vision is whatever you can do with the US dollar, you'll be able to do with this token. Now, do we believe that everyone is going to drop Tether and USDC and come to this token? No. No, because as with any other payment service, people are going to make choices depending on what they need, right? Because this is, for example, this is a government issue token. It may be some people may say, no, I don't want to be involved with the government, right? I just don't want, I prefer to deal with private parties instead of to deal with the government. And that's okay, right? And in this case, they can work with Tether or Circle, whatever it is. Um, but some people may prefer to do it that way, right? So we believe that it's not a competition between these tokens, is what is best suited for your needs. And it can be a myriad of reads. Like I tell people, I was telling my daughters about this, right? Like you can use Zelle, you can use PayPal, you can use Venmo, you can use WhatsApp payments, you can use Cash App, you can use a bunch of things to pay people. At that moment, you choose the one that you're going to use, but you have them all available, right? It depends on your use case. So we believe that people use it depending on their needs. We obviously believe that adoption is going to start in Wyoming and then grow. But we see this as just another way to make a financial transaction.
Will there be the opportunity to open up accounts like
So
stablecoin accounts the
initially the
same way the
government,
Circle does?
yeah, so initially the government will not be facing retail.
Mm-hmm.
What you would do is you will get the token through an exchange, right? So the state is going to be working with different exchanges or secondary market, players to be able to issue that token to them, and then they resell. Then down the road, it will be considered whether there will be the retail connection, right? And whether there will be that, because these companies that we're going to be working with will be best suited to deal with customer service and just technology powering overall for these wallets. If
Mm-hmm.
the state issues that, they need to have their own wallet with the customer and everything. So increases that reliance on the state, not only from the technology side, but the customer support side, which believe that at least in the beginning, these third parties are best suited to do that than the state wills. But there is the consideration is down the road, it will be assessed whether retail will be facing the state directly.
Because in my mind, that would be the most attractive reason to come and onboard with a new token if
Yeah,
you have the opportunity to bank with them.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, no,
stage two.
absolutely. But yeah, at phase two for sure, because, states in themselves, government, as I said, they're not very good with technology, right? So we need to bring the private industry, which has the knowledge and all of that, to help. And once the state feels more empowered, and this is not only to provide a more seamless experience, but also a better experience for the users, is that we're saying, listen, right now we're not able to do that, but down the road we probably will. Well, we're going to learn from it, and then we're going to source ourselves, just not at this moment. Like going back to when I told my GC that I didn't know how to do payments, right? We need to be honest with ourselves, so we can
Yeah,
and
yeah.
cannot do.
You have to know what
Because
government are better at and what they're not,
exactly, because at the end of
and
the day, we're custodians of these reserves, and we need to make sure that we're providing the best service for the holders.
yeah, fantastic. I wish you the most the most success in this, and I will
Thank you.
continue to follow closely the updates. I already have been for some time. If any of our listeners are interested in staying up to date, actually, the commission has its own website um, where they update on when their next meetings are. I don't know if you make the meetings available or the minutes or whatever, but they have a YouTube channel. And if I know we have a lot of compliance folks who listen in, if anybody's looking for a job as a chief risk and compliance officer, it can be done remote, or you could move to Wyoming.
Yeah.
They are hiring, and there's more information about that on their website, stabletoken.notion.site/Wyoming Stable Token Commission. I'm sure you could find that by just Googling
Wyoming
Wyoming
Stable Token
Stable Token
Commission.
Commission.
I don't think that many sites out there are lingering with that name. Yeah, we have our next public meeting next Thursday, the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
It is televised, and people can join in on the web as well. All of the records are made public, goes back to the visibility, and people can join in and actually ask questions at the end of the meeting to the commissioners. So I highly recommend people that are interested to listen in, see where we are, and participate.
Very cool. Thank you, Flavia. And thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it was a great pleasure. Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.